You don't notice it at first. It's something small, almost invisible, a habit so ordinary, so routine that it slips through your day without resistance, without suspicion. But what if I told you that something sitting quietly in your kitchen right now, something you've probably reheated hundreds of times, could be slowly working against your body? Not loudly, not suddenly, but quietly, persistently, over years. And by the time your body tries to warn you, it doesn't whisper anymore. It aches, it weakens, it changes, and you're left wondering when things started to go wrong. Because the truth is, it didn't start today. It started with the small things you were told were harmless. It started with habits that felt safe. It started with what you chose to reheat. I'm Dr. Emily Carter, and here on Healthy Aging, we don't just talk about living longer, we talk about living aware. Because aging isn't just about time passing. It's about the silent decisions you make every single day, the ones that either protect your future or slowly erode it. If you've ever felt more tired than you should, if your body feels just a little more inflamed, a little slower to recover, if you've ever brushed off discomfort and told yourself, it's just age, then I want you to stay with me. And if you value understanding what's really happening inside your body, I invite you to subscribe. Not for me, but for the version of you that deserves clarity, strength, and control over your health. Because what we're about to talk about, most people never question. And that's exactly why it becomes dangerous. There's something deeply comforting about leftovers, isn't there? You cook once, and it carries you through the next day. It feels efficient, practical, even responsible. But your body doesn't experience food the way your mind does. To your body, reheated food is not the same story. It's not the same chemistry. It's not the same structure. And sometimes, it's not the same safety. Because when certain foods are reheated, they don't just lose nutrients. They transform. And not in a way your body appreciates. Let me take you into a moment you've probably lived many times. It's late evening. You're tired. Maybe your joints feel heavier than they used to. Your energy isn't quite where it was 10 years ago. You open the fridge. There it is. A container from yesterday. You don't think twice. You heat it. You eat it. And in that moment, it feels harmless. But what you don't see, what no one shows you, is that some foods, when reheated, begin to develop compounds your body struggles to process. Compounds that, over time, can contribute to inflammation, oxidative stress, and in some cases, even increase the risk of cellular damage. Not immediately, but gradually, like rust forming on metal. Slow, silent, relentless. One of the greatest misconceptions we carry is this: if it smells fine, it must be safe. But your nose doesn't detect chemical changes. It doesn't recognize structural breakdown at a molecular level. And your taste buds, they're even easier to deceive. Because many of these changes don't affect flavor. They affect you. As we age, your body becomes less forgiving. What you could tolerate in your 20s, your system now processes with more effort, more strain. Your detox pathways slow down. Your cells repair more slowly. Your inflammation baseline rises, even when you don't feel it directly. So the small things, the repeated things, begin to matter more than ever before. And that includes what you choose to reheat. There's a quiet danger in routine. Because routine removes awareness. You stop questioning. You stop observing. And that's where mistakes become habits, and habits become long-term consequences. Think about this for a moment. How many times have you reheated rice without a second thought? How many times have you warmed up chicken, believing protein is always safe? How often have you microwaved vegetables, assuming you're making the healthy choice? It's not your fault. You were never taught to question it. But today, I want you to start seeing things differently. Not with fear, but with awareness. Because awareness is where protection begins. Let's talk about what really happens beneath the surface. When certain foods are cooked and then cooled, bacteria can begin to develop if they're not stored properly. That part, most people understand. But what fewer people realize is that reheating doesn't always undo the damage. Some toxins produced during improper storage are heat stable. That means, even if you heat the food until it's steaming, those compounds can remain. And when they enter your body, they don't just pass through. They interact. They irritate. They challenge your internal balance. But beyond bacteria, there's something even more subtle. Chemical transformation. When food is exposed to heat, cooled, and then reheated again, its internal structure can shift. Proteins can denature in harmful ways. Fats can oxidize. Certain compounds can become more reactive, more unstable. And over time, repeated exposure to these altered compounds can place stress on your cells. Not enough to make you sick overnight, but enough to slowly influence your long-term health. And this is where the real danger lies, not in dramatic symptoms, but in invisible accumulation, the kind that builds quietly until one day your body feels different, and you can't quite explain why. And you might notice it in subtle ways. You wake up tired, even after a full night's sleep. Your digestion feels heavier, slower. Your energy dips earlier in the day. Your body feels inflamed. Not painfully, but persistently. And you start to accept it. You tell yourself, this is just what getting older feels like. And sound shan na shan mine. But what if it's not just age? What if it's accumulation? What if it's years of small, repeated exposures? Things you never thought to question. Abainamd. This isn't about fear. It's about reclaiming control. Because once you see it, you can change it. And sometimes the most powerful changes are the simplest ones. In the next few moments, I'm going to walk you through 5 common foods that sit in kitchens all over the world, foods that feel completely normal, archai. But when reheated, they can become something very different. And once you understand what happens to them, you may never look at your leftovers the same way again. Not with anxiety, but with a quiet, informed awareness, the kind that protects you without overwhelming you and because your body is always listening to what you give it. Every meal is a message. Every habit is a signal. And over time, those signals shape your future. So before you open that fridge again tonight, before you reach for what feels convenient, I want you to pause, just for a second, and ask yourself, is this still nourishing me, or has it become something else? Because sometimes, the difference between healing and harm is not what you eat, but how you eat it. There's a moment, right after you press start on the microwave, when everything feels decided. The hum begins. The light turns on, and for a few quiet seconds, it feels like you've taken care of yourself. But inside that container, something far more complex is happening. Something your eyes can't see, but your body will eventually feel. Let's begin with something almost everyone trusts. Something simple, neutral, even comforting. Rice. You've eaten it your whole life. It feels harmless, clean, safe. But what most people don't realize is that cooked rice is one of the most sensitive foods when it comes to storage and reheating. When rice is left at room temperature for too long, even for just a few hours, it becomes the perfect environment for a bacterium called Bacillus cereus. This bacterium produces toxins that are stubborn, heat-resistant, meaning when you reheat that rice later, you're not destroying the danger. You're warming it, serving it, inviting it into your body. And the frightening part? You might not feel anything dramatic. Maybe just mild discomfort, maybe nothing at all. But repeated exposure, over time, can irritate your gut, disrupt your digestion, and slowly weaken your body's resilience. It's not about one meal. It's about patterns. Now think about how often this happens. Rice cooked in the afternoon, left out while life gets busy, then stored, reheated, eaten without a second thought. A cycle so normal, it feels invisible, but your body remembers, even when you don't. And then there's chicken, lean protein, a symbol of health for so many people. You cook it carefully, you store it properly, You reheat it the next day. It seems responsible. But what happens to chicken when it's reheated is something few people ever talk about. Proteins are delicate structures. When chicken is cooked, those proteins begin to unfold. But when it's cooled and then reheated again, those structures can change further in ways that make them harder to digest. For a younger body, this might pass unnoticed. But as you age, your digestive efficiency changes. Your body doesn't break things down as easily. And suddenly, that reheated chicken feels heavier. You might notice bloating, discomfort, or a subtle fatigue after eating. Nothing extreme, just enough to slow you down. But there's something deeper here. Repeated reheating, especially at high temperatures, can lead to the formation of compounds that increase oxidative stress in the body. Not toxins in the dramatic sense, but stressors, tiny, invisible pressures placed on your cells. And over years, those pressures matter. So then we come to something many people believe is the healthiest choice they can make. Vegetables, spinach, leafy greens, nutrient-rich, vibrant, full of life. You cook them with good intentions. You store the leftovers because wasting food feels wrong. And the next day, you reheat them. But certain vegetables, especially those high in nitrates, can undergo a transformation when reheated. Spinach, for example, contains natural nitrates. When reheated improperly, these nitrates can convert into compounds called nitrites, and under certain conditions, into nitrosamines. These are compounds that have been studied for their potential link to cellular damage, and over long-term exposure, even increased cancer risk. Not from one plate, not from one mistake, but from repetition, from unawareness. And this is where people get confused, because vegetables are healthy, and they are. But the way they're handled, the way they're stored, the way they're reheated, that's what changes the outcome. Health is not just about what something is, it's about what it becomes. Now, let's talk about something even more surprising. Potatoes. Warm, filling, comforting, a staple in so many homes. But like rice, potatoes can become a breeding ground for harmful bacteria if left out too long after cooking. One of the risks comes from a bacterium known as Clostridium botulinum. Under the right conditions, especially in low-oxygen environments, this bacterium can produce toxins that are extremely dangerous. Now, let's be clear. This is not common in everyday situations where food is handled properly. But when potatoes are wrapped in foil, left to cool slowly, and then stored without proper refrigeration, the risk increases. And reheating, once again, does not guarantee safety. And you begin to see the pattern, don't you? It's not just reheating. It's the entire journey of the food, from cooking, to cooling, to storage, to reheating. Each step either protects you or slowly works against you. And then there's oil, the silent ingredient, present in so many meals, yet rarely questioned. Cooking oils, especially certain vegetable oils, can undergo oxidation when heated. But when they are reheated again, especially multiple times, that oxidation intensifies. And oxidized oils are known to contribute to inflammation in the body. They create an internal environment that makes it easier for chronic conditions to develop over time. Again, not overnight, but slowly, quietly, like a drip that never stops. Think about fried food. The oil used once, then reheated again, and again. Each time, it changes. Each time, it degrades. And each time, your body has to deal with what it becomes, and this is where awareness becomes power, because none of this is about eliminating everything you enjoy. It's about understanding what's happening beneath the surface. It's about making small adjustments that protect you in the long run. You don't need to become obsessive. You don't need to live in fear. But you do need to see clearly, because once you see clearly, you make better decisions, without effort, without confusion. And maybe that means cooling your food faster. Maybe it means avoiding reheating certain foods altogether. Maybe it means choosing fresh meals more often, even if they're simpler. Because sometimes simplicity is safer. Your body is incredibly intelligent. It responds to what you give it. It adapts. It compensates. It protects you, but it also keeps score. And over time, those small daily choices either build resilience or slowly take it away. So the next time you stand in your kitchen, holding that container, not die. I want you to feel something different. Not fear, but awareness. A quiet understanding that says, "Ertam so indamidai arndam mai." I know what I'm choosing. And that is where real health begins. Da. In the final part, I'm going to show you something even more important. Not just what to avoid, but how to protect yourself in a way that feels simple, sustainable, and empowering. Because knowing the risk is only the beginning. Knowing how to respond is what truly changes your future. There's a quiet shift that happens once you truly understand something. You stop moving on autopilot. You stop choosing out of habit, and you begin, gently, to take control again. Not in a dramatic way, not with fear, but with awareness so calm, it almost feels like peace. Because the truth is, your body is not fragile. It's incredibly resilient. It has carried you through years of stress, late nights, skipped meals, things you didn't even realize were slowly draining you. And still, it shows up for you every morning, every breath, every heartbeat. But resilience is not infinite. It needs support. It needs respect. And most of all, it needs you to stop working against it without even knowing. So what do you do now? After everything you've heard, after realizing that something as simple as reheating food can quietly influence your health, what actually changes? It starts with something very simple: time. The way you cool your food matters more than most people realize. Because bacteria don't appear magically, they grow when conditions allow them to. Warm, slow, cooling. Food sitting out longer than it should. These are the moments where risk begins to build. So instead of leaving food on the counter, telling yourself you'll put it away later, you begin to act sooner. You let it cool slightly, but not for hours. You store it properly. You create an environment where harmful growth doesn't get a chance to begin. 2. Then comes something even more important: how many times you reheat. Because every time you reheat food, you're not just warming it, you're changing it. Again, and again, and again. So one quiet rule, one that can protect you without making your life complicated, is this: reheat once, not repeatedly, not throughout the day. Once, and then let it go. And there's also something deeply powerful about portioning. Instead of storing one large container, you divide your meals, smaller portions. So when you need to reheat, you only heat what you'll actually eat. Nothing more, nothing wasted, nothing reheated again later. It's a small habit, but over time, it protects you in ways you don't immediately see. Imafdai. And then, there's awareness of which foods deserve more caution. Rice, potatoes, chicken, leafy vegetables. Not enemies, but foods that require respect. Foods that ask you to be just a little more mindful. Maybe that means eating them fresh when possible. Maybe that means storing them more carefully. Maybe that means, sometimes, choosing not to reheat them at all. Not because you're afraid, but because you understand. And then we come to oils. This is where many people unknowingly create long-term stress in their body. Reusing oil, heating it again and again, letting it darken, thicken, change, and still believing it's fine. But your body feels the difference, even when you don't. So you begin to shift. You use fresh oil when possible. You avoid reheating oils multiple times. You choose stability over convenience. Because you now understand that what seems small is never truly small. And here's something even deeper. Something most people don't talk about: your relationship with convenience. Because reheating food is not just about food. It's about time, energy, fatigue. Those evenings when you feel too tired to cook. Those mornings when your body feels heavier than it should. Those days when you tell yourself, this is good enough. No matter. And sometimes it is. but not always. Because your future health is built in those quiet moments, not in grand decisions, but in the small ones, repeated over and over again. This is not about perfection. It's not about never reheating food again. It's about reducing the invisible burden on your body. It's about giving your system fewer things to fight so it can focus on healing, repairing, keeping you strong. Mesela may. You don't need to overhaul your entire life overnight. That's not how real change works. Real change is gentle, sustainable, almost unnoticeable at first, but powerful over time. Maybe tonight, you store your food a little sooner. Maybe tomorrow, you choose to cook just a bit less, so you don't rely on leftovers as much. Maybe next week, you become more aware of how often you reheat the same meal. These are small shifts, but they compound. And over months, over years, they become something much bigger. They become protection, shiwei, because the body you live in tomorrow is shaped by the decisions you make today. Quietly, consistently, without applause, without urgency, just intention. And perhaps the most important thing to understand is this. You were never meant to carry all this information alone. You were never taught to question these things. So if part of you feels surprised, even unsettled, that's not weakness. That's awakening. And now, you have a choice. Not a perfect choice, but a better one. A more aware one. So, the next time you open your fridge and your hand reaches for that familiar container, pause, just for a moment, not with fear, but with a quiet question. Is this still supporting me, or is it simply convenient? Because sometimes, the path to a stronger, healthier future doesn't come from doing more. It comes from seeing clearly and choosing differently. And years from now, when your body still feels strong, when your energy still carries you through the day, when you wake up and feel just a little lighter, you won't remember this video. You won't remember these words, but your body will remember the choices you made, and it will thank you for them, in the only way it knows how, by staying with you, longer, stronger, and quietly, faithfully. Take care of it, because it's been taking care of you all along.